You're not too emotional. You're carrying a lifetime of repressed pain. You're never too emotional. You're simply the child who had to swallow storms before you even knew what weather was. Every outburst you didn't have permission to express stayed inside you, coiling itself into your ribs like a hidden fault line. And when adults told you to calm down, what they really meant was, don't make your pain visible. That was the first time you learned to disappear. You grew up believing your sensitivity was the problem, when in truth, it was the evidence. It was proof that something around you was breaking, something that had nothing to do with who you were. But children don't have the luxury of separating cause from identity. So you blamed yourself for what adults didn't know how to handle. You carried that blame like luggage into adulthood. And this is why even today, your tears sometimes feel like betrayal. Why your anger frightens you. Why the slightest criticism can make your chest collapse in on itself. You're trained to silence your truth, to bury your emotional reflexes the way people bury hazardous materials deep, out of sight, out of mind. But buried things don't die. They ferment. You're not dramatic for feeling deeply. You're wounded for having been forced not to. The intensity you fear is not a flaw, it's a backlog. It's the echo of every moment you needed comfort and instead received control, dismissal, or indifference. And your body remembers what your childhood was forbidden to express. And the moment you stop seeing your emotions as explosions and start seeing them as evidence, everything changes. You begin to understand. Nothing inside you is too much. What happened to you was. Your body has been trying to tell your story long before your mind was ready to hear it. The tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your throat, the anxiety that arrives without context, these are not defects. They're debris from years of emotional self-abandonment. When you were small, your body held what your environment rejected. It became the vault for every unspoken truth. Maybe that's why you feel things so intensely now. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system spent an entire childhood operating on high alert. You learned to scan rooms, predict moods, and absorb other people's chaos before it reached you. That hyper-attunement became your survival skill and later, your emotional burden. And when you finally reach adulthood, your body doesn't suddenly understand that you're safe. It stays loyal to the old rules. It keeps bracing, tensing, flinching, preparing for storms that may no longer exist. You're not overreacting, you're over-remembering. Your body is a historian of everything you survived. This is why small things can feel enormous. Why you cry at moments that seem minor. Why your reactions feel disproportionate even to you. The scale doesn't match the present moment because it wasn't built in the present. Your emotions carry the weight of the past, not the size of the current trigger. And healing begins when you stop shaming your body for knowing what it knows. When you treat your emotional intensity not as a malfunction, but as communication. It's your inner child finally knocking on the door you were once too young to open. Strength was never something you earned, it was something you were assigned. Other kids got to melt, collapse, fall apart, throw tantrums. You learned to brace. You became the emotional shock absorber for the people who were supposed to absorb yours. And that's how the myth was born. The myth that you were the strong one, but being forced into strength is not strength. It's deprivation. You weren't praised for resilience, you were punished for vulnerability. Every time you tried to express fear or sadness, someone told you to get over it, stop crying, or grow up. They didn't see that they were shaping your identity around silence. So you learned to interpret emotional need as failure. You learned to apologize for crying. You learned to hide your trembling. And eventually, you stopped reaching out at all. Because every attempt to be human was met with disappointment or discomfort from the people around you. Their reactions taught you that your softness was unwelcome. And now, in adulthood, you still police yourself. You still feel guilty for asking for help. You still think you must solve everything alone. Not because you prefer independence, but because dependency was never safe for you. Your strength is actually a scar, an old adaptation trying to pass itself off as personality. Healing means reclaiming the right to not be okay. It means letting your body unfurl in places where you don't have to be the fortress anymore. You were never meant to carry that much weight. You just never had a choice. Many people imagine flashbacks as visual scenes, like a movie playing inside your head. But emotional flashbacks are quieter, more insidious. They show up as overwhelming feelings with no obvious source. Sudden shame, panic, sadness, or rage that seems to erupt out of nowhere. You're not reliving a memory, you're reliving a state. And because nothing happened in the present moment, you end up blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're unstable, dramatic, too much, but what's actually happening is a time slip inside your nervous system. Your body remembers an old danger and responds as if you're still small, powerless, and unprotected. This is why your reactions sometimes confuse even you. A tone of voice can make your heart race. A disappointed look can make your stomach drop. A closed door can trigger abandonment grief. These moments feel irrational, but they're deeply logical when you consider the emotional blueprint they come from. And instead of compassion, you've often met these reactions with shame. You scold yourself for overreacting, when in reality, your system is trying to complete an emotional cycle that was interrupted years ago. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. You're finally feeling what you once had to suppress. Healing begins when you name it. When you say, "This isn't me now, this is younger me trying to be heard," because the moment you stop fighting these emotional waves, they lose their power to drown you. You didn't grow up with emotional language, you grew up with emotional landmines. No one explained feelings to you. They just reacted to them. So you learned early that speaking your truth could create chaos, tension, or punishment. Silence became safer than honesty. Compliance became safer than curiosity. You swallowed so many words that your throat became a vault. You held back questions, needs, fears, and dreams because no one around you had the capacity to receive them. And with time, silence stopped being a strategy. It became your native tongue. You learned to read everyone else and ignore yourself. And now, as an adult, you feel the consequences of that deprivation. You struggle to articulate what hurts, not because you don't know, but because your childhood trained you to freeze the moment your emotions rise. Your body still expects danger when you express vulnerability. Your voice shakes because it remembers. This is why you often explode only after reaching your limit. Why you rehearse conversations in your mind, but never say the words out loud. Why you feel guilty for setting boundaries, even when they're necessary. You're not inarticulate, you're historically silenced. Your emotional vocabulary was stolen from you long before you could claim it. Healing is learning the language you were once denied. It's allowing yourself to speak, tremble, and still keep going. Every word you release now is a word your younger self never got to say. Your tears were never welcomed. They were treated like misbehavior, manipulation, inconvenience. So your body learned to fear them. Crying became something shameful, something to hide, something that made you feel exposed. Not because tears are dangerous, but because the reactions you received were. Even today, when your eyes well up, your whole system tightens. You brace for judgment, rejection, or mockery, even if no one is around. That fear isn't irrational, it's conditioned. It's the residue of every moment you cried and someone punished you, dismissed you, or walked away. Your nervous system remembers abandonment vividly. So now, tears feel like failure. You apologize for crying even when no one asked you to. You wipe them away before they fall. You rush to fix your face so you won't look fragile. But what you're really doing is protecting yourself from memories, not reality. You're trying to avoid a threat that no longer exists. And yet, tears are one of your body's most honest languages. They're not weakness, they're release. They're the way your nervous system decompresses. When you cry, you're not breaking down, you're unclenching. You're letting out what was never meant to be carried alone. Healing is letting yourself cry without punishment. It's allowing your tears to fall and realizing the world doesn't collapse. It's discovering that what once made you unsafe now makes you human. You learn to understand everyone long before anyone tried to understand you. As a child, you became the emotional interpreter for adults who couldn't regulate themselves. You studied their moods, predicted their reactions, and adapted your behavior to prevent explosions. That hyper-understanding wasn't compassion, it was survival. And because you became so good at reading others, you stopped expecting anyone to read you. You learned that your needs would always matter less, that your feelings were secondary, that your role was to soothe, absorb, and adjust. Being attuned to others became a reflex you couldn't turn off, even when it hurt. Now, in adulthood, this shows up as over-apologizing, over-explaining, over-accepting. You give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they've shown you who they are. You excuse mistreatment because you can trace the origins of someone's pain. You understand them so much that you forget to protect yourself. But emotional understanding shouldn't cost you your boundaries. Empathy doesn't require self-erasure. You are allowed to stop carrying relationships that depend on your silence. You deserve care that doesn't require justification or sacrifice. Being understanding is beautiful, but not when it becomes a cage. Healing means learning that someone else's suffering is not a free pass to mistreat you. You can have a soft heart without abandoning yourself. When you spend a lifetime suppressing your emotions, they eventually find a way out. Not gently, not gradually, but in a rush that feels bigger than you. And that eruption can frighten you because you've been told your whole life that intensity is dangerous. But the explosion isn't who you are, it's accumulated neglect finally spilling over. You weren't taught to release emotions in real time. You were taught to store them like toxic waste. You pushed down sadness, swallowed anger, numbed fear. But the body isn't a landfill, it's a living system. And living systems overflow. Your outbursts aren't overreactions. They're overdue reactions. And because no one ever modeled healthy expression, you panic when the dam breaks. You fear losing control. You fear being seen. You fear being judged. But what's happening in those moments is your body's desperate attempt to decompress. It's not an attack, it's a plea for relief. Instead of shaming yourself for these emotional surges, try listening to them. Ask what they've been holding for you. Ask what hasn't been expressed for years. The eruption isn't proof of instability, it's proof of survival. Only people who've held too much for too long break open like that. Healing means learning to release emotion in smaller waves instead of tidal ones. It means giving yourself permission to feel before you reach the breaking point. You don't need to fear your intensity, just the silence that created it. Shame wasn't born in you. It was planted. It entered your life in small, quiet ways through sighs, eye rolls, punishments, and unmet needs. It came from adults who didn't know how to nurture your emotional world, so they taught you to mistrust it instead. Over time, that shame grew roots and disguised itself as your identity. You started to believe you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. You believed your emotions were burdens rather than signals. And because children internalize what they experience, You carried this shame as if it were a natural part of you. But shame is never natural, it's inherited. As an adult, this shame still shadows your life. It appears when you want to speak up, but freeze. When you need support, but hesitate. When you feel pain, but instantly blame yourself for feeling it. You've spent years confusing emotional injury with personal failing. You're not the problem your environment was. But here's the truth. Shame cannot survive in understanding. The moment you realize your reactions make sense, your shame begins to crumble. The moment you see that your emotional intensity was a response to neglect, not a defect, you reclaim parts of yourself you thought were broken. Healing is remembering that you are not born ashamed. Shame was taught, absorbed, and performed. And now, slowly, you're unlearning it. One gentle truth at a time. You often feel emotions before you can name them. They rise like waves without explanation, sudden heaviness, sudden anger, sudden fear. And you blame yourself for not being able to control it. But this isn't a failure of logic, it's the aftermath of emotional neglect. You learn to sense danger long before you learn to interpret it. When you grow up hyper-attuned to other people's moods, your nervous system becomes your primary language. Your body reacts instantly because it had to. Your feelings arrive first because, as a child, pausing to analyze would have cost you safety. Your body learned to respond before you could think. Now, in adulthood, your emotions still outrun your thoughts. Your heart races before your mind knows why. Your stomach knots before you can find the trigger. This doesn't mean you're irrational, it means you're trained. Your survival instincts matured earlier than your emotional education. Instead of shaming yourself for this sensitivity, try honoring it. It's your body's way of saying, something here feels familiar. It's not predicting danger, it's remembering it. And the more you understand these signals, the more power you gain over them. Healing means slowing down the moment the feeling arrives. It means asking gently, what is this reminding me of? Your emotions are not storms trying to destroy you, they are messages trying to reach you. There is a kind of grief that doesn't look like grief. It doesn't come with tears or funerals or comforting hands on your back. It comes quietly through exhaustion, numbness, irritability, and the hollow feeling you can't explain. This grief isn't about losing someone. It's about losing the childhood you needed, but never had. You learned early to minimize your pain, so you minimized your losses too. You told yourself it wasn't that bad, even when it was. But your body never bought that story. It kept every unmet need, every lonely night, every unsoothed fear. Over time, that stored sadness became background noise, persistent, invisible, heavy. As an adult, you feel moments of inexplicable sorrow. A song, a smell, a quiet morning can trigger a heaviness that feels older than you. And in a way, it is. It belongs to the child you were, the one who had to grow up too soon, who had to be strong without support, who had to silence their own needs to stay safe. This grief is not self-pity. It's recognition. It's your system finally acknowledging the truth of your past instead of burying it. And though it hurts, it's also a sign that you're healing. Only when you feel safe enough do you begin to grieve what you once had to ignore. Healing means allowing yourself to mourn, not just what happened, but what should have happened. It means honoring the younger you who deserved gentleness, protection, and warmth. This grief is not a regression. It's an awakening. You apologize before you speak. You apologize when you cry. You apologize when you take up space, make mistakes, or simply have needs. It feels automatic, like breathing. But this reflex has a history. You learned that being tolerated depended on being small. As a child, the safest thing you could be was undemanding. You tried to be easy, quiet, compliant. You tried not to inconvenience anyone. You became hyper-aware of the emotional climate around you and adjusted yourself to match it. Apologizing became a way to manage other people's reactions, not your own behavior. And now, the habit continues. You say sorry even when you've done nothing wrong. You apologize when someone bumps into you. You apologize for things outside your control. It's not weakness, it's conditioning. Your apologies are survival remnants, not character flaws. But here's the truth. Existing isn't a mistake. Having emotions isn't a burden. Needing care isn't a crime. You don't owe anyone an explanation for being human. Your younger self apologized to stay safe. Your adult self apologizes because no one ever told you safety can exist without self-erasure. Healing means replacing sorry with truth, with boundaries, with presence. It means remembering that you deserve space, just like anyone else. You are never too much, you are simply made to feel like less. Your anger didn't disappear in childhood, it went underground. You were taught that anger was dangerous, disrespectful, or ungrateful. So you learned early to swallow it, to mask it, to turn it inward. But anger has a purpose. It's the emotion that tells you a boundary was crossed and yours were crossed often. Because you weren't allowed to express anger, you never learned the difference between healthy anger and destructive anger. So now, when it rises, it feels overwhelming, like a threat instead of a signal. You fear it will consume you. But the truth is, you're not afraid of anger. You're afraid of the consequences you once faced for having it. This is why you sometimes feel enraged by small things, but numb to larger hurts. Why you say nothing when someone mistreats you, but crumble at a minor inconvenience. Your anger got twisted, misrouted, distorted. It's not dysfunctional, it's displaced. Your system is still trying to protect the child who wasn't allowed to say, stop, and anger, when understood, isn't harmful. It's honest. It's the part of you that refuses to be erased. It's the guardian of your dignity, the boundary keeper you never got to grow. Your anger isn't the enemy, it's evidence that something inside you still believes you deserve better. Healing means letting your anger come home. It means allowing it to speak without shame. It means learning that you can express yourself without becoming what hurt you. Your anger, finally free, becomes clarity, not chaos. You walk on eggshells even when no one asks you to. You soften your words, shrink your needs, dim your emotions. Not because you want to, but because you learned that love was conditional. Affection depended on your ability to stay small, agreeable, quiet. And now you fear that being fully yourself will cost you connection. You monitor your emotional volume the way some people monitor their bank accounts, carefully, anxiously, expecting scarcity. You force yourself to be easy to love, even when it exhausts you. You offer understanding instead of expressing hurt. You offer silence instead of needs. You offer harmony instead of truth. But this strategy comes at a cost. You become invisible in relationships. People love the version of you that bends, not the version that breathes. And every time you hide your real emotions, your inner child hears the same old message: you're too much. You must earn your place here. Yet, the relationships that can hold your truth are the ones that can actually hold you. The right people won't flinch at your feelings or punish your honesty. They won't label your depth as drama or your needs as inconvenience. They won't ask you to collapse yourself for closeness. Healing means practicing emotional presence. It means testing safety with small truths. It means allowing yourself to be seen not perfectly, but authentically. You're not too much. You are simply made to believe that taking up emotional space was dangerous. You are never emotional Demay. You are a child carrying storms alone. You were a heart taught to whisper in rooms that demanded your silence. You were a body storing what no one helped you release. None of this makes you broken. It makes you surviving. Now, for the first time, you get to rewrite the rules. You get to feel without asking permission. You get to take up emotional space without apologizing. You get to meet your own depth with reverence instead of fear. The intensity inside you isn't a flaw. It's a map back to the parts of you that were never allowed to exist. This is the moment your healing turns into reclamation. Not gentle acceptance, but radical ownership. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to express. You are allowed to stop shrinking to fit the emotional capacity of others. Your emotions were never the problem. The problem was the world that punished you for having them. But you are not in that world anymore. And every time you honor your truth, even in one small breath, you free the child who never got the chance. This is not the end of your journey. This is the first moment you are truly walking it with your whole self, unhidden, unshamed, and finally understood. Tell me this, and be brutally honest. When did you first learn that being yourself was too much? I'll meet you in the comments and we'll unlearn that lie together.